somehow discriminating, and we have a history of abuse and all the rest of it. And I don't think the president has attacked that strongly enough, and I wish he would.
So what do we do? What do you do to regain that trust? If you were in that position, or you could advise him, what would be your advice? How would you draw the two sides together?
Well, civil rights leaders asked him in a meeting, which was leaked to the press when he first got in office, to name an attorney general who would be somebody from the black community who had experience dealing with all these discrimination matters, as had Eric Holder, who worked for Obama when the president was vice president. He didn't do that. He has named some good people to the jobs lower down in the department, but they have the history of not being very effective in trying to resolve these problems. I think what he should do is listen more to the people who are the leadership of the organizations and have them come in, talk to them and the like, and have someone do a listening tour in the country. He's going to do one about immigration and have Kamala Harris do it to find out exactly what people think we ought to do. And he ought to sit down with police and with people from the civil rights groups together to talk about what should be done about these issues.
It is early days, isn't it, really? 100 days in, it's a 4-year term after all. But from what you say about people listening to what he's been saying, apparently from a poll conducted by Washington Post and ABC, 42% of Americans say he is doing too little to reform, for example, police practices.
Right. That is so obvious, because even after the Chauvin trial, we've had more black men, unarmed black men being killed. And it seems like every day you wake up or you're still hearing about it over and over again. It's quite evident that something more and something different needs to be done. And I think listening and talking to people who are expert on these matters and the civil rights leaders and the like, and bringing the police together, because the police have a stake in this too. Most of them are afraid when they're out patrolling and the like. I found that out when I had the Civil Rights Commission, which I headed, and I subpoenaed a bunch of them, and they told us that in public, that they're mostly scared all the time, and that they react in hostile ways just because they're afraid. So I think bringing people together to talk about this issue, he should have had the police commission that he promised during the campaign that he would do in the first 100 days. Although I don't like the 100 days metaphor. You know, it came out from Franklin Roosevelt during the Depression when he said, I'll do X in 100 days. And so now everybody thinks in 100 days. It's a landmark. We should do all these things, yes.
Right, well, we're as guilty as that as anybody, but it's an interesting benchmark to look at, isn't it? After all these years of racial injustice, how much hope do you have right now? How much optimism do you have?
Well, you always have to have hope and optimism, and you also have to have hope that when you say how you feel, and when we still have people who are oppressing, that something be done on these issues, that people will listen. And I think the president, he's got a lot of experience with these matters and has evolved over time, as we like to say about such things. And I think he can do it, and I think he would want to do it. So I think we should get on with the business of doing it.
Mary Frances Berry, it's just great to have you on the program. Do appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you. Now, the U.S. has seen 142 mass shootings since Biden took office, and on Wednesday he urged Congress to pass gun safety laws. The president, who calls gun violence an international embarrassment, has issued executive orders, but critics say they just don't go far enough. Andy Gallagher has this report.
The Gun Violence Archive, an independent organisation that tracks gun crime, defines a mass shooting as 4 or more shot or killed. By that metric, 2021 is already a deadly year, with 147 mass shootings across the nation. In March alone, 8 people were killed in Atlanta. Less than a week later, 10 died at a supermarket in Colorado. Yet the issue of gun control remains, as ever, deeply divisive. In the run-up to his election, Joe Biden promised tough action, including buying back weapons, banning imported guns, and so-called common-sense steps to curtail a uniquely American problem.
Who in God's name needs a weapon that can hold 100 rounds, or 40 rounds, or 20 rounds? is just wrong, and I'm not going to give up till it's done.
As a memorial to the victims of gun violence was installed on the National Mall, the President announced 6 executive orders, including tackling the growing problem of homemade, untraceable firearms known as ghost guns, an order gun advocates say will do very little.
There's no way that you're going to stop this. There's nothing you can do about it. This is the reality of the world, and 3D printers are real, and I can just go press a button, and I'm going to print one of these.
Today I speak to a nation in grief.
I know there's not a parent in America who doesn't feel the same overwhelming grief that I do.
Time and again, presidents are forced to comfort a nation that loses around 40,000 people to guns every year. But pressed by the powerful gun lobby, members of Congress have been unwilling to change gun laws, something that organizations for gun control hope will change.
There's evidence and data to back up these proposals will save lives. We just need to get that passed through the Senate, and the American people will support and reward those at the ballot box who work to make their lives safer and to reduce the amount of gun deaths we see every year. And they will punish the people who stand in the way.
When a mass shooting killed 14 students and 3 teachers here in Parkland, calls for gun reform grew, but little changed. Tackling this nation's right to bear arms isn't something a president can do without legislative support, and that for now seems unlikely. For many across the US, thoughts and prayers are simply not enough. But meaningful change will be long and hard fought for. For the first time since 2010, the Supreme Court will soon hear a major gun case based around the right to carry weapons in public. Most of the justices are conservative. The decision could have major implications for gun control across the US and will be watched closely. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Miami, Florida.
All right, after the break, we turn to foreign policy. Joe Biden has worked hard to set a different tone from his predecessor, but is changing foreign policy as easy as changing the rhetoric.
We're dealing with an unusual disturbance over the Middle East. I'll talk about why it's unusual in a sec, but first let's look at the impact that it's had. This is toward Mecca after severe thunderstorms rolled through on Tuesday. Saw some hail here and flooding. Just because of all that rain, it had to go somewhere, and it did. And it's unusual. Here's why it's unusual, because we've got the rain for Yemen, not just in the mountains, but this is also falling over lower ground as well. So that rain will continue for Yemen as we head towards Saturday. Some spells of wet weather for areas of Iran, particularly toward the south, and also unsettled for northern Afghanistan. Still getting some pulses of moisture as we head toward Tanzania. Some pretty good downpours, too, throughout the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I want to take you further south because watch this push of moisture for the Eastern Cape. We're really going to have to check for the potential of flooding over the next few days. This system is also going to drop the first snow of the season for Lesotho, eventually making its way to Johannesburg. So I show you the 3-day forecast. There's where it becomes unsettled. We've got some thunderstorms into the picture, but by Sunday, conditions will begin to dry out.
Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea, is ranked one of the most dangerous cities in the world. 101 East investigates the violent gangs instilling fear on the streets. On Al Jazeera.
A weekly critique of the stories hitting the headlines.
The news media have been left to sort through mixed messaging on a quite complex story.
From mainstream to street journalism, the Listening Post covers the way the news is covered on Al Jazeera.
Vaccines, a promising path out of the pandemic, but implementing the greatest inoculation in history is testing the global community.
Around the world, already a clear gap has emerged between rich nations and poor ones when it comes to vaccinating their populations.
From the geopolitics to the pure economics, the misinformation, the latest developments.
What's going on here is very different. For a start, the vaccine comes in the form of a nasal spray.
Special coverage of the coronavirus pandemic on Al Jazeera.
again, and welcome back to our special coverage of President Joe Biden's first 100 days in the White House. We spent the first part of the